Obamacare. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Stupid people are ruining America.
The president just wants to take care of you. He just doesn't think you're able to do it for yourself.
There's a very thin line between communism, progressivism, Marxism, socialism.
The empire will strike back.
You still don't know that this was political.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of America Our Way. I am your host, Dustin Hoyt. As we get into another episode here, the first thing I want to talk about, jumping right in, Trey Gowdy, South Carolina GOP rep. I always talk about him. You heard him in the intro. I'm always spouting his name here on Vigilant Liberty Radio because he's just fantastic. I mean, the guy is one of the most articulate people in Congress. And what's even better, he's a straight shooter. I mean, he's not one for fancy gimmicks or talking around. He just wants to get straight to the answers. The House Oversight Committee had yet another hearing on the IRS scandal. The IRS looking into conservative political groups and denying them 501c3 status, 501c4 status. And Lois Lerner famously has, pleaded the fifth a few times now, and I've played that on one of the previous shows here. And they had the IRS commissioner in for questioning today. Now, Trey Gowdy is very frustrated. He was a lawyer, for those of you who don't know, and as a lawyer, he gets very frustrated when the law in his mind is violated or is called into question or anything of that nature. Like with the one of the last episodes, we talked about him being frustrated that the president wasn't faithfully executing the law. And the House Oversight Committee has issued a subpoena for documents regarding the targeting of conservative groups, which, as we all know, was confirmed by the Secretary General, the Treasury guy that went over there, the Inspector General, Inspector General, who went over there and did an audit, basically, of the IRS, looked into this problem. He said definitely something was going on. And so now it's just been fighting Democrats and bureaucrats to get the information we need to find out who is responsible for denying the rights of political groups here in America. Now, the thing about 501c3 status is that 501c3 is supposed to be non-political. It's supposed to be groups that are helping in the community outreach, educating people, that kind of thing. Now, with some of these Tea Party groups or whatever, a lot of the people who don't understand the Tea Party movement think it's all about protesting and raising funds for conservatives. And the fact of the matter is, first and foremost, the Tea Party is all about backing the Constitution. I mean, it was formed in protest to Obamacare because of how far it overreached into our freedoms. So these Tea Party groups, overwhelmingly, they will have protests, but the overwhelming amount of their actions are all about educating people on the Constitution, uniting people in support of the Constitution, of America in general. And, a lot of them are involved in charities, a lot of them are involved in, housing projects and religious outreach. I mean, all kinds of community stuff. And that is under the 501c3 tax-exempt status. It falls directly into that category. So, in 2010, President Obama, in the State of the Union address, criticized the Supreme Court for their ruling on Citizens United. The Citizens United case was where the Supreme Court decided that a corporation is accorded the same political rights as an individual. Corporations can donate funds to politicians, political groups, super PACs, all that stuff. Now, Obama was very angry about this, and in his State of the Union, he criticized the Supreme Court famously to their face. And that's why, Justice Roberts was sitting there, and he's like, that's not true, in the middle of the State of the Union, arguing with the president. Because A, they don't have to be at the State of the Union, and B, how dare the president mock a co-equal branch to their face in a platform where they can't respond. So, Lois Lerner, in her emails that have been turned over by this subpoena, so far, this House committee, the Oversight Committee, has basically decided that she had motive. They can't prove it per se, but she's got a lot of emails that are suspect, and Trey Gowdy talked about that on Wednesday. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some parts of his comments in his time on the floor, and we'll get into it as we go here. Now, the first one, he's just asking a very simple question. He just wants the material that they're supposed to get when Obama made the statements that allegedly spurred Lois Lerner into action.
I want to make it easier for you. How long will it take you to produce Lois Lerner's emails that don't involve 6103 material from January of 2010?
Now, the material he's talking about is tax-related stuff that the committee can't see, different, legal documentation that's private information. So he's just saying, exclude the stuff that we're not legally allowed to see.
Well, could we have that by Friday?
Absolutely not.
Why?
No way, because there's no way physically we can get
January of 2010, that's 1 month, no 6103 material, just email.
1 month.
Just 1 month. When can we get that?
We have to go through each of those emails to make sure it has no 6103.
Well, how long is that going to take? Can we have it by Friday?
I have no idea.
Just 1 month, Commissioner. January of 2010. No 6103, and let me tell you why I'm interested in it.
No, well, I'll tell you, today is Wednesday. I'd be happy to ask the people who do the work and get back to you.
All right, let's do January of 2010. And then let's get ambitious and do February of 2010. And then let's go March 2010. And I think you know why I'm doing 2010, Commissioner. When the President likes 5-4 Supreme Court decisions, he calls that settled law, like the ACA. When he doesn't like 5-4 Supreme Court decisions like Citizens United, he attacks it, which is what he did in January of 2010. And that's why the timeline is so important, Commissioner.
Now, see, that's the kind of knockdown, drag-out stuff that makes me a Trey Gowdy supporter. Because when he's in the committee, he's not there trying to score political points necessarily. I mean, he manages to get his zingers. But overwhelmingly, he's just asking point-blank questions that have obvious answers that should be easy. Can you just get me these documents? It's not that hard. I mean, one human cannot send an ungodly amount of emails that take years to comb through. I mean, that human combed through them in a month. Think about that for a second. They're trying to say it'll take them 3 years to come up with the emails that she sent over the course of a few months. In no reality is that even remotely logical. Because going through all these emails, one person sent them, reviewed them, wrote them, and sent them in just a few months. So how is it that the IRS is incapable of getting this stuff together for Congress in a timely manner? It's absolutely ridiculous. They're making excuses because they don't want to give up this information because they know it's incriminating. They know it and we know it. Why else would they fight it? It's not hard. Just give up the documents. See, that's the problem with Congress these days. These days, when somebody gets caught doing something wrong, they just convolute it, backpedal, do everything they can to cover it up, toss mud on it, and hope for the best. And what's worse is it's working. I mean, these hearings have been going on forever, and they have yet to get solid proof of anything. And it's because they're being fought for every inch of ground. That's how progressives operate. They don't just do what they're supposed to do. They don't just abide by the law. They don't believe the law is correct if it's anything that impedes what they think is right. It's crazy. Now, the next thought here we're going to go into is Gowdy talking about how these emails are incriminating. I mean, the ones that he's already gotten are very, very incriminating. And quite frankly, I want to look at them, and I haven't done that yet, and I don't know if they're posted online. That's something I'll have to look into. But Gowdy does a pretty good job of talking about it himself, so I'll let him do that.
The jury is never entitled to know the motive, but they always want to know the motive. You don't ever have to prove why somebody did something, but the jury always wants to know, why did this happen? And if you start in January 2010 with the President's State of the Union address, and then you move through Lois Lerner's emails that have nothing to do with 6103 material, you begin to see a motive develop.
Now see, this is the whole premise of the argument. They are saying that Lois Lerner was inspired by President Obama's remarks at the State of the Union because of his opposition to the Citizens United case. Lois Lerner allegedly decided to take matters into her own hands and step in as an IRS official to limit the freedoms of these groups and to punish people financially and deny them status and tax them if they were one of the groups that was, standing in Obama's way or working against Democrats. And if you haven't figured it out yet, Lois Lerner is very clearly a Democrat. And I mean, the whole thing is just fishy. The idea that they can't give up these documents, or they're taking years to give up 1 month, 2 month, 3 months worth of emails that one person sent, is insane. Okay. Now, Trey Gowdy, in this next bit, is talking about how he just wants them to follow the law. It's not about what you believe. It's not about opinions. They don't want anything extra. Just give them what they asked for. It's kind of like if you were to go to McDonald's and order a cheeseburger, and you said, I want a double cheeseburger, no onions. And they're like, okay, do you want mayonnaise? No, just a cheeseburger without onions. What about lettuce? Do you want lettuce? No, just no onions. But the tomatoes are really good. I don't want tomatoes. I don't want anything extra. Just give me that cheeseburger with no onions. Okay, well, how would you like it specially wrapped or in the cart? Can you just give me the burger? I don't care what it's wrapped. Just give me the burger. Okay, well, what if we got apple slices to go? I just want the burger. And that's basically what this guy's doing.
Because if you would like us to stop that production of Lois Lerner emails and go to January 2010, I will go and find out exactly how long.
What I want is this. I want the subpoena complied with. I want it complied with in a timely fashion. And you and I both know that if there's no 6103 material, whether or not you think we need something or we ought to have it or that we're on a wild goose chase, frankly, I could care less what you think about that. Our subpoena is our subpoena. If you don't like it, move to quash it. Otherwise, comply with it.
Now, when a subpoena is issued, there's no conditions, ifs, ands, or buts that can be changed with that. You're just supposed to do what it says. Now, if a U.S. citizen gets a subpoena that they need to appear with all of their DVDs, their whole DVD collection, if they appear in court and they say, well, I didn't know which ones you wanted, and I had some that I didn't want you to see, and there were some that I was borrowing, and so I don't know if this counted as mine, and then there were other ones that were actually games and movies, so I didn't know if those counted, and then there was also instructional DVDs. I don't think those count as movies. There was also kids' movies. I don't think kids' movies is what you wanted. If that was to happen, a judge would throw that person in court in a heartbeat. That guy would, or not in court, excuse me, that person would end up in jail. No questions asked, in contempt of court, in jail. But because this is the IRS, that can't happen. That won't happen. They can't hold these guys in contempt for refusing to comply with this subpoena like they're supposed to. I mean, this really isn't a hard concept to grasp. They are investigating X. Give them all the documents they've asked for. Even if it's 50,000 documents, just give them over. It's not hard to do. Now, they're saying that they have to censor the IRS information. They have to search and find all of the ones that are not related to taxes. How hard is it to have someone, I'm assuming multiple people, going through these emails to do this? All right, we're going to continue on with the story after the break.
This is David Silverman, president of American Atheists, and you are listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
Now let's be clear. Now let's be clear. Now let's be clear. There are no winners here. Now let's be clear.
All right, we're back. Now we're talking about Trey Gowdy. We're talking about the House Oversight Committee having a hearing and the IRS commissioner coming in to testify. Now, Trey Gowdy's pretty much been tearing this guy apart using common sense and logic, asking things like, comply with the law, stop beating around the bush, get us what we asked for in a timely manner. It's not hard to do. Now, the next bit I'm going to show you, or I'm going to let you guys hear, is it's just kind of indicative of the problem with Congress and having hearings with bureaucracy, because these people are masters of red tape. They are masters at throwing up roadblocks, side talk, staying out of trouble, throwing up a smokescreen. Now, Trey Gowdy's one of the best at cutting through the crap, but, you know, when you ask a straightforward question, how hard is it to give a straightforward answer? I don't know of anyone that convolutes things like this. When you ask a simple question, you expect a simple answer. Proof positive of what's wrong in Washington right here.
Because you noted that our search was overly broad. I want you to tell me what search you would use to find an email where an IRS employee responded, "You who," when she was told that a Democrat won a special election. What search terms would you recommend that we use to find that email?
We've worked from the start of this investigation.
What search terms would you use to find an email where the response was, "You who," when a Democrat won a special election?
We might actually work together to see if there are search terms that would involve political campaigns, elections, political
parties. What
parties.
search term would you use when Lois Lerner responded that a GOP Senate would be worse than a GOP president?
I would actually, if you wanted to, we'd go through and say, look at political parties, look at references to elections, GOP and Democrat.
Or we can do this. Just give us all of the emails she sent or received in January of 2010 that don't involve 6103 material, and we'll decide what we think is relevant and not. Because she said, "I've done nothing wrong, I've broken no IRS rules or regulations, and I have broken no laws." That is pretty broad, Mr. Commissioner.
Now, what he's talking about is the fact that Lois Lerner, when she said, "I did nothing wrong, I broke no laws, by the way, I'm shutting up," she opened herself up to inquiry. Now, any lawyer will tell you that when someone in court, a witness, says, "I did nothing wrong, I didn't break any laws," you can ask basically any question because it gives the lawyer a chance to probe at all of these different areas. And that's pretty well understood. And that's what Gowdy's infuriated about, is that because she opened herself up saying, "I've done nothing wrong," it means you've got nothing to hide. Fifth Amendment protects you from self-incrimination. It protects you from testifying and saying things that would make you guilty. You do not have to say things that would show you're guilty. If you testify that you were here and you saw this and that, and it creates circumstantial evidence that puts you in the place for a crime, you don't have to admit those things to the court because it will make you look guilty. It's kind of like those awkward situations you see in movies all the time. It's not what it looks like. American Pie is notorious for doing it. Jim will... Like there was one where Jim like messed up the cake, and then there was the dog, and everybody thought he was doing horrible things to the dog. But in reality, it was just a horrible misunderstanding where the dog was like trying to lick him because of stuff that he did. Whatever. The point is that in this situation, Lois Lerner has opened herself up to these inquiries, and so the idea that the IRS can somehow block Congress from getting these documents is crazy. It's illegal, and that's the whole point. Trey Gowdy has said, if you do not think that our subpoena is, viable, then quash it. Get a lawyer, go see a judge, and get it revoked. Or put a stay on it, and we'll have a trial, whatever. At least, if you don't believe in it, rather than just throwing up roadblocks constantly, get it done. Have a judge decide and be done with it. But that's not the game plan here. The game plan for the liberals and the bureaucrats is to just completely block as much as they can before they have to resort to something final like that, because they're hoping people will lose interest or get voted out of office, things like that. Like, you don't even hear really about the IRS scandal anymore because it's been around for so long. People are like, oh my God, I'm so tired of it. People have a short attention span. And that's what the IRS and these Democrats are hoping for. They're hoping that the people's short attention span will draw attention away from this fiasco that could very well show amazing levels of corruption in the IRS in President Obama's government. Now, I want to show you one more from this meeting. I want to let you listen to one more clip from this hearing on Wednesday. He keeps offering to censor and pick up and pick the emails for Congress rather than just hand them over. And it's the whole hearing he's doing this, and this is what you hear every time a bureaucrat is having fire lit under him in Congress. They never answer the question. They convolute it, and then the Democrats will come to the rescue rather than do their job and ask the questions they're supposed to ask.
Now, if I could just have a moment. This is exactly the discussion we've been having for the last year, and we'd be delighted to have, which is, out of the universe, what is it that you think would be most important? We'll give you the universe, but as I say, that'll take you more than this year. If we could figure out...
I just told you, it's January of 2010, because that's when the Supreme Court issued its opinion in Citizens United. That's when the President of the United States famously, to their faces in the State of the Union, criticized that, and that's when Lois Lerner began to say, IRS can't fix it, we need a plan, we need to be cautious, we need to make sure it's not per se political. Let's start with January 2010. Can we have that by Friday?
And as I would say, I am delighted, and it's this kind of discussion, for instance, with the
Mr. Costin.
4-year worth of, could I just respond? With the 4 years worth of applications of C4s, we might be able to say, well, which ones would you like, so that we don't spend 3 years at it. January 2010 is a perfectly understandable definition, and we will actually respond to you as quickly as we
Commissioner,
can.
you need to understand our perspective, though. Maybe this started off as an investigation into the targeting of C4s, but when you have people who are supposed to be apolitical responding the way that she has responded, Tea Party dangerous, maybe the FEC will save the day, we got to make sure it's not per se political. When you have people in positions of authority and responsibility that are expressing overtly political commentary on government email, I think we ought to be entitled to all of them, and that's why we asked for it.
Chairman.
I would just simply note that, for the record, that you already have all those emails, which is why you have all of that information. So it is not.
We don't know what we don't know, Mr. Commissioner. We know the ones we have.
Now, you see, this is what's so troubling, is that the emails they've already gotten have shown that Lois Lerner is a political hack. They've shown that she thinks that having Republicans in power is dangerous. Now, I would agree there are a few issues where Republicans fail to defend individual liberties. I would argue that the Bush administration, second one, was a pretty clear demonstration of a president that was a Republican and did a horrible job. And it's not to say Republicans are perfect. I mean, I feel, as I'm sure many of you do, that establishment Republicans can be catastrophic for the country when they're in power for too long. Now, that's not a surprise to anybody. All of you have seen Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and John Boehner act the way they act and somehow stay in power. And we've seen how bad that is for the country. Now, you, like me, understand and appreciate conservatives like Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Justin Amash. Now, I know some of you have some criticisms of Cruz, and we'll get into that later today, hopefully. But I think that the fact that these emails show that she was having conversations about being sneaky, about being cautious in order to get what she wants, in order to hit these 501c3 applications, in order to hit these people. And there's even been indications that IRS information was shared about GOP donors. There have been people applying for 501c3 groups that have been audited multiple times. The same thing with, different conservative donors across the board, even some libertarian donors. And it's not okay. It's not acceptable that this is happening in America. In America, our government is supposed to be limited. And one of the chief ways that is enforced is by the checks and balances between the branches. The House Oversight Committee is a form of a check on the executive branch. And the IRS is supposed to be nonpartisan, but it is part of the executive branch. It is executing the taxes authored and legalized by the president and Congress. Congress passes tax law, the IRS enforces it. That's it. So when the IRS is going after people like this, and you have Democrats saying it's a wild goose chase and refusing to even investigate it, when it is their job to investigate something to the fullest extent, when you have the Treasury inspector coming in and saying, yeah, these guys done goofed, there's something awry here, and the Democrats are still saying that it's a goose hunt and it's, all about anti-Obama propaganda, etc., etc. Look, even if it is a goose hunt, it doesn't matter. It's their job to find irrefutable evidence that nothing's there. And the best way to do that is to just do the investigation. How hard is that to go through all these emails? How hard is it to do your job and look into every lead? This is a significant lead. You had somebody that's supposed to be non-political doing political things and discussing politics with government emails. You've got this lady more than likely telling IRS agents to go after conservatives, to go after libertarians, to go after the Tea Party. Now, that's not something that we can accept in America. And it kills me that there are not more people furious about this IRS scandal. You can't just forget about this issue. You can't just let it go away. Now, when people don't understand the whole Russia thing, which very few of them do, when people don't understand the small stipulations, when people don't understand the minute details, the finer points of philosophy, of liberty, it's understandable. But when there's a possibility that the government is using taxes to punish people based on their politics, that is something that every American should be infuriated about. Imagine what would happen if this had been the Bush administration and it was Planned Parenthood being audited every year, every month. Imagine if it was Code Pink that kept getting audited. Imagine what would happen if it was these different community organizing groups. What if it was the Southern Poverty Law Center? What if it was, one of Al Sharpton's organizations? What if it was Obama's PACs? What if it was Hillary Clinton's funds, the Clinton Foundation? What if it was one of those groups that kept getting audited? What if it was Battleground Texas that kept getting audited? Liberals would be up in arms. They would be infuriated. They would not stop to the ends of the earth to get this thing investigated. They would find pay dirt, because that's what Democrats do. Democrats set their mind to a target and they make it happen. They are progressives. Their whole outlook, they've been conditioned to get it done at all costs. Alinsky 101, whatever it takes, get it done. And Republicans, conservatives, are just so used to fighting the status quo. It's all about slowing the Democrats down. It's never about defeating the Democrats. It's never about defeating liberal ideology. It's never about pushing for freedom. And it's about time we got to that point. We'll have more when we come back.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Hi, this is Missy Bordius. Join me as I share my womanly bits on the Conservative Feminist Show, 11 p.m. on Fridays, here on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
Have everybody flustered. Now, see, what I really don't like about the dramatization of this case is that it's so clearly cut and dry. The decision of this case is obvious, and if you don't know anything about it, I will go ahead and I will tell you. The Hobby Lobby case is from the Green family. They own Hobby Lobby. Their family started it. And they have exclusive deals to run a Christian business and to play Christian music in their stores. They employ lots of people all across the country. And their main objections to Obamacare is that it requires them to provide abortion-inducing drugs. And what I mean by this is any sort of drug that can, in theory, kill a embryo once it's been fertilized, because they believe that once an embryo is the Green family, they believe that once an embryo has been fertilized, it's a human, it's a life. It's no longer birth control at that point. Once it reaches that stage, it's officially a person. And a lot of Christians hold this view, so it's not like it's far-fetched or anything. So it's kind of ridiculous in my mind that so many people are surprised by it, or they think it's some kind of, right-wing nuts, or even the discussion of that the company denying women medical rights or access to medical care. And this argument, on the whole, anytime somebody says it's about access to health care, you just laugh. Just start laughing, because once they've made that statement, it's no longer a conversation about facts. It's a conversation about nothing, because that's not what's at stake here. In America, we have started this trend of saying that access to health care is somebody paying for it for you, as opposed to you being able to go out and buy it on your own like an adult. But for whatever reason, it's not what's happening. It's not the conversation we're having. We're not having an honest discussion about what's going on. And that's just the way the left operates now. It's just the way they work. And there's not really much that can be done about it in terms of forcing them to play fair, or however you'd like to put it. The left's going to do whatever the left's going to do. And chief among the things that the left does is change the facts, not use logic or the proper words to define things. They change words. That is one of the most rampant faults of the left. They always want to change words, and you see this with as opposed to pro-abortion, pro-choice, as opposed to you get things like, instead of welfare, call it deserved benefits, or safety nets, or social programs. But in reality, welfare is welfare is welfare, and that's what the left does. And so with this whole health care debate, which is really a welfare debate, a government handout debate, this whole lawsuit sprung about basically because of fake terms. Now, hopefully the Supreme Court will see through that, but there's no telling these days, especially after the ruling they made on Obamacare, which was so very clearly off the mark. Now, the case that's before the Supreme Court is not as controversial as it's being made out to be, mainly because the businesses are privately owned. Now, I don't know about you, but if I start a business, I want to run it the way I want to run it. It's not a matter of if I'm allowed to do one thing or another. It's not a matter of whether or not, my beliefs are somehow valid or anything to that extent. And that's what the left has done with this case. They have tried to make the point that Hobby Lobby is not entitled to run their business according to their beliefs because women have the right to whatever birth control they want. And that's very true. Women do have the right to whatever birth control they want. The problem is Obamacare and the left have created this theory, this falsehood, that your insurance not covering it means you don't have access to it. And in a lot of cases, like cancer treatments or surgery, that's true. If your insurance doesn't pay for it, you probably can't get to it. Can't. Doesn't mean you don't have access to it. You do have access to it, you just can't afford it. And that's the whole crux of the debate. Is affordability a right? Do you have a right to cheap health care? Do you have a right to demand certain expectations from your employer? And the answer is resoundingly no. You do not have a right to certain benefits from your employer. When you go looking for a job, you and your employer make an agreement on what you will work for, being like what work you're going to do and how much of it, and you will agree on what you'll earn. That includes your health insurance benefits. Now, the same thing goes with any voluntary contract in society. When you go to rent an apartment, you can negotiate your rent. You can negotiate that. You can also negotiate your pet fees. Rent is not a set fixed price. Your income, your salary is not a set fixed price. It's the same concept that allows you to go and ask for a raise once you've proven yourself in the workplace, because it shows you're not at risk, you plan on sticking around a while, and your work reflects a deserving person. Your work reflects good work, productivity, that should result in higher income. You're more valuable. You're basically leveraging, give me a raise. If you don't, I might start looking elsewhere. It's in their interest to keep you happy and keep you loyal. But with this case, they're saying that the government passing a law somehow trumps the religious freedoms of the people who own the business. Now, Hobby Lobby is not publicly traded in the same way that, say, Walmart is. Hobby Lobby is privately held. The family has run that company for 40 some odd years. And the same thing goes with the cabinet company that is the other lawsuit. I forget the name of it at the time. But it's a Mennonite company, an Amish company that are saying, no way are we providing this stuff. And if they refuse to provide it on principle and the law stands, then Hobby Lobby is looking at $1.3 million in fines a day, or $475 million a year in fines because they don't believe that they should pay for abortions or abortion-inducing drugs. The Amish company that donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to charities all over their state, they'd be out about $35 million a year if they had to pay the fines for Obamacare. So, Sebelius and HHS have won 4 out of 5, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it's 4 out of 5 of the appeals. The Mennonites and Hobby Lobby have won 5 out of 4. And this is also held up by the Citizens United, that companies do have the right to political beliefs. And if they have the right to political action, political activism, then would they not also have the right to freedom of speech, which is what Citizens United was based on? If they have the right to freedom of speech, do they also have the right to freedom of religion? Well, the answer is yes. They have a right to live their life by certain beliefs. And this notion that abortion is wrong is a very widely held belief. Very widely held. Most of the population think abortion is wrong unless it endangers the life of the mother or is the result of rape. 80% of people support abortion if it's rape, incest, or the mother's going to die. Now, 60% of people say abortion is wrong in all other cases. So the majority of people is very clear on this. Now, I'm not going to get into whether or not you have the right legally to get an abortion, because that's a huge debate, and I don't feel like delving into it. But does a company, a person, does your boss have to pay for your abortions regardless of their beliefs? And the answer is no. And I believe that HHS will lose the lawsuit in the Supreme Court because they are arguing that healthcare is a right and that having access to these things is a right. But the businesses not providing you that benefit as a stipulation of your job does not infringe upon your rights to use those drugs. You can still buy them at the pharmacy. You can still get a doctor to prescribe them to you. So if it's not illegal, if you can still go and buy them, then the company is in no way denying you access to those drugs or those treatments. And forcing a company to do that hurts other companies and the Christian companies. You see, if people are vehemently opposed to what Hobby Lobby is saying, if they say abortion should be provided, you guys suck for not offering these benefits, then people aren't going to shop there. And that will hurt them in the form of capital. It'll hurt their bottom line. On the other hand, if people like what they're saying, if people like what Hobby Lobby's doing, they will go shop there, and they will buy products, and it will bolster their bottom line. So these opinions will either hurt or help Hobby Lobby or the Mennonite Cabinet Company in the free market. That's the punishment for any political belief that you take. Any stand that you take one way or the other when it comes to politics is affected by the free market. So when we have these people making these arguments in the Supreme Court, the precedents that this will set, just like the Obamacare ruling, is dangerous. For the Supreme Court to rule in favor of the government, it will declare that women have the right to abortion drugs being paid for by other people. It will just totally infringe on the rights of a boss to negotiate benefits. If all employers are required to offer X amount of health care, then the only thing that becomes negotiable is your salary, and even then it'll be at a lower rate. I mean, could you imagine, and you don't have to imagine because this is reality, men getting maternity leave and maternity coverage? Single men. Thankfully, I'm grandfathered in. My health plan was not affected by Obamacare, but there are millions of Americans across the country that are getting health coverage they don't need, which increases the cost of employing you to your employer, which means your boss is going to take that out in the form of salary. It could hurt you in your chances to get a raise. It could hurt you in your starting salary. And them's just the breaks. There's nothing you can do about it, especially if this ruling goes in favor of the government. Now, one of the interesting things that was said in the Supreme Court is that the female justices, which, if you may or may not know, are liberal, they were saying that what would stop a company from denying blood transfusion coverage, what would stop them from cancer coverage. And the fact of the matter is that these drugs are not, $300,000 drugs that you cannot get without the help of insurance, unless you bankrupt yourself or kickstart your own funds. So the female justices have already set this up to be a debate on whether or not abortion is a condition like cancer that you shouldn't have to pay for, no matter how cheap those Plan B pills, $80, may be. We'll have more when we come back.
Hi, this is Larry O'Connor from WMAL in Washington, D.C., and you're listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
So, as long as we're talking about healthcare, Obamacare, let's talk about delay number 38. 38. For those of you who haven't heard, Obamacare was delayed again, unofficially, because of a loophole that the administration is using. The law was written with built-in deadlines, one of which being the end of enrollment would be finite. They had a set date when it had to be wrapped up, because otherwise, how are you going to decide who's going to get fined and who's not? Political affiliation? This is the Obama administration, so it's really not all that far-fetched to come to the conclusion that Obama might actually try to hurt people based on their political affiliation with this healthcare law, poorer people especially, to try and force the poor to vote Democrat. But what's going on is that basically HHS is saying, the deadline's over, people are going to get hit with the fines now, we're not pushing it back any further, them's the breaks, that's it. You can't do anything else about it. But in reality, they have added this loophole that is basically an honor code stipulation about if you have applied or not. They're adding this little checkbox on the healthcare.gov website that says, check if you've tried to sign up before and had trouble. And if you check that box, it will allow you to apply for health insurance through Obamacare without any problems. You can get it, no stipulations, no fines, no consequences for signing up late or not signing up at all. So it could prevent you from getting that fine. Or you could just sign up when you get sick and get it quickly. That sort of thing. And it's punishing people for not, A, wanting it, B, being responsible, and C, it's a gimmick in the hopes of trying to get more people to subsidize all the sick ones that have signed up. Because the overwhelming majority of people that have signed up for Obamacare so far have been the sick and the old, which are exactly the people that weren't supposed to sign up. The ones that were supposed to sign up were the young and the healthy. Because young and healthy people really, really want another bill to add on top of the pile that's already probably too high for them. The economy's not exactly booming out here, folks. But I don't have to tell you, you're out there living it. Now, this box that you check is going to be on the honor system. Nobody in the government is going to try and find your old application. Nobody in the government's going to check your browser history, look for your name in the system, or anything like that to show that you applied in the past. So, what this does is basically excuse me, I'm stuttering for some reason. What it does is create a perpetual open enrollment for Obamacare. And that's against the law. The law was written with these barriers in place to force the administration to get things done by deadlines so that you wouldn't have the government being lazy, because that's what government does best. If you don't hold its feet to the fire just like a person, they're not going to get stuff done. 90% of the population won't get off the couch if they don't have a reason to. That's just the way people are. They're lazy. You know, very few people are getting out and working out because it feels good for them, because it's good for them, because they like it. Very few people are motivated to do anything work-related without putting them to the coals, especially government. Government is slow and clunky and full of red tape and just a monstrosity in general. So Congress built in these deadlines to force them to get it done. And I think this might have also been a fail-safe in case there was Republicans throwing up roadblocks. But what's ended up happening is that you've had the Obama administration basically declaring portions of the Obamacare law to be null and void. Namely, enrollment deadlines, website deadlines, marketplace deadlines, all sorts of deadlines. And they just keep pushing this law back further and further and further, despite the fact that there are finite limits written into the law itself. And you hear conservatives always complaining about it. You know, he's rewriting the law. Well, he really is. In reality, he got this thing passed, and then he's pushing it deadlines back and not getting it done. And arguably, you know, if to be fair, if they set a goal that was too lofty, they don't have a choice but to push it back. I mean, what are they going to do? Just give up on the law altogether because of what happened? Are they going to implement the crappy, you know, underfunded, underimplemented, you know, non-manageable mess at the deadlines because they have to? Well, if the president was upholding his constitutional oath to faithfully execute the law, he would. But in reality, it's more sensible for the president to take liberties with how laws are executed in order to execute them more effectively. And that's a typical thing throughout presidential history. Presidents do this as one of their checks and balances. They choose how to execute the laws. Now, Congress can put these deadlines in, and it makes the president have egg on his face when he can't meet them or what have you. But the fact is, it's kind of like a homework deadline or like a project deadline. You know, you've got a big project that's due, you're working on it, you're trying to get it done, and then, you know, the night before comes and you just don't have it done and you have to ask for an extension. The difference is, with the president, there is no professor there that is demanding they get it in on time. The president can basically change the deadline whenever he wants, and that's part of his job. I mean, people are ranting and raving about how unconstitutional it is. It's not unheard of. It's not unheard of for a president to execute the laws in ways like this. I mean, the president can sit on his hands, and if Congress doesn't like it, they can impeach him. That's how this works. If the president won't do his job, you impeach him. Now, the president is trying to implement this law. We got to give him credit for it. He is trying to enact this horrible, horrible law. Let's give him credit for that. So, when people are ranting and raving about, you know, the president choosing to enforce the law with Obamacare, it's a really dumb argument, and they're wasting their time. Because A, the president's going to enforce the laws how he wants to enforce them. Now, that doesn't mean he can just change, you know, massive things. But when it comes to deadlines, to implementing functional parts of a bureaucracy like this, this is not unheard of. I mean, you don't put something in place until it works. You wouldn't drive off in a race car until the tires are put on. You couldn't make it anywhere. You know, or if the lug nuts weren't tightened, your wheels would fly off and you'd crash and die. So it makes sense in that aspect. From his perspective, it makes sense. But if you want to talk about the president not enforcing the laws as he's supposed to, let's talk about immigration. Now, I kind of get mixed views on immigration law because I don't believe that the government should be doing the things the way they're doing. I kind of get mixed reviews because I feel like if people want to come here and work hard for a living, they should be able to do that. But I feel like immigration on the whole is really messed up in our country because we have minimum wage laws, because we have 18 billion licenses and fees and permits that you have to get to start any kind of business. I mean, it's illegal for you to, make tamales or cook food and sell it to your neighbors. I mean, you can't even sell organic milk from a goat if you're a farmer. It has to go to an official distributor with FDA inspections and all the licenses and permits and health code crap. And that's the way the government works. So when you've got immigrants that come into this country and they try to start a business, they have to buy a business license, a vendor license, they have to take tests in their field to get certified, and all this crap. When in reality, it should be very easy for someone to start a business in this country. The perfect example is taxis in New York. You get this medallion system where you can't own a cab without a medallion, and it costs, millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this medallion. So you got to work for 10, 15, 20 years before you can even own your own car, as opposed to just painting your car yellow and putting a taxi sign on it, which is really all it should take to be a taxi. Just paint your car and offer to drive people places. How hard is that? But no. The government has made it difficult to do even the simplest of jobs. It's illegal for your kids to have a lemonade stand out in the yard. And that's the main reason I have a problem with immigration reform, because these people come here and they want to work hard for a living, but they can't speak the language. They don't have the permits or the permissions or the licenses to start their business, to be able to go out and produce wealth. And so they're forced into welfare benefits. And then on top of that, the Latin countries, Central and South America, overwhelmingly vote socialist and communist. So I'm torn when it comes to this, because these people they're not going to come here to assimilate. They're not going to come here to learn our ways. They're not going to come here and be able to work for a living. They're going to be forced into the welfare system, and they overwhelmingly would vote Democrat. So all in all, the system is rigged to ruin any chances of good immigration that way. I mean, obviously you get people that come over that already are educated and know the language, and they just take a test and they can get certified. But even then, usually that costs money. And then the immigration system itself is all gunked. But the point is that Obama is not allowing ICE agents to enforce border security. It's not allowing the Border Patrol to deport people it finds trying to break into the country. And if you don't like the law, which in this instance is a much more egregious instance of failure to enforce the law than Obamacare, then you have to change it. If you think a law is unconstitutional, sue and take it to the Supreme Court. As the president, I imagine you could get it on the docket and get a hearing about it pretty quick. As the president, I'm sure you don't have to go through the appeals circuit when it comes to a law like this. And when it comes to drug laws, you have the same thing. Holder talking about decriminalizing drug laws and talking about, making marijuana crimes less harmful across the board, which I'm not against. But my problem is how they're going about it. They're just taking liberties with the law, saying the law doesn't matter, and then just doing whatever they want, enforcing them however they want. When in reality, these folks in government need to be changing the law. And see, Ted Cruz got a lot of heat for this, and I thought it was unfair. Ted Cruz said that people who have marijuana or are in possession of marijuana should be arrested and prosecuted, period, because that's the law. And if you don't like it, please challenge it or get a new law passed. It's not hard. Just do it the right way. And I agree. I mean, why, take the baby step and break the law by not enforcing it or decriminalizing the law from the inside, whereas the law is still on the books, you just decide not to let it apply. Why do that when you could just legalize the dadgum thing and have it done with? Help people with epilepsy. Help people getting chemotherapy treatments. Help people with glaucoma, with extreme nausea, muscular sclerosis. All of these diseases, especially the brain diseases and the ones that cause severe nausea. These diseases are treatable, or at least more manageable, epilepsy with pot. And if you just let these people have the herb that grows in the ground, you could save yourself so much trouble. And I can't understand why they don't just make the case to legalize it when the majority of Americans just want the government to leave them alone. Passing a law that says, hey, we're going to leave you guys alone when it comes to plants. I think most people could get behind it. All right, that's our show. Hope you enjoyed it. I am Dustin Hoyt. This is America Our Way on Vigilant Liberty Radio. Have a good week. We'll see you next time.
This show is copyright by VLR Media. All opinions of panelists and guests are their own and may not reflect the opinion of VLR Media, the host, or anyone else.